We often are told by the priests in homilies or in retreats or even in confession or spiritual direction that we need to forgive, but rarely do they ever tell us how to forgive. It is wonderful to hear the gospel reading which states that we should forgive not just 7 times 7, but 70 times 7. It's easier said than done. It can even be frustrating hearing that we need to forgive and the benefits of forgiving, but not knowing how to do it. How do we forgive someone who has broken our trust, who destroyed everything we built, or is so negative? Most of the time, these people I am talking about are not total strangers, but our own family members, our spouse, our children, our brothers and sisters, etc. The world says, run away. They are toxic. World solution is separate and segregate. Hello everyone, today's topic is about how to forgive and show mercy. As Catholics, we are not to separate or segregate, but to unite in a loving relationship. This begins with the forgiveness and mercy. I have a great secret that makes me forgive very easily. Not theoretical, but practical. Real-life Catholic advice from Practical Catholic.
Welcome to another episode of Practical Catholic with David Cease. Practical Catholic is a spiritual coaching show to help you find peace, love, and joy in family and work life. We are here each and every week to help you grow spiritually, to become successful in this life, and to be a saint for the life after.
My story begins in 2009, a little after the economic crash in 2008. Essentially, what had happened was after the economic crash, I was in debt by a lot of money. If you ever listen to my podcasts, prior ones, I was probably close to about $600,000 in debt. Imagine that. And there was no relief in sight or anything that could help me or rescue me. So that's how deep in debt I was. But in 2009, God blessed us, and because I held faithful, we were coming back and we were paying off those debts, and it was great. Actually, in 2009, we were able to pay off all the debt. But but at that time, it was very nail biting and very scary. So one day, I get a phone call from my banker. Okay, and I have a very good relationship with my banker. In this bank. As an entrepreneur, you should always be friendly with your bank and be consistent with your bank. They provide you great loans when they know who you are, and when they know who you are, they'll be a lot willing to give you great loans, which I've gotten. But I got this phone call, and the woman that's on the line, she knows me very well. In fact, actually, I know her father very well because he's a deacon in a church that I go to. So she gives me a call and she says, "We think we find something going on with your bank account. People have been withdrawing cash from your ATM." And I told her, I said, let's say we'll call her Betty. I said, "Betty, I don't have an ATM. I don't authorize anyone to take out cash. Cash is not part of our business process, and we don't need to use it. I have credit cards that people can use, and only select people can use credit cards." I knew the power of cash and its evilness in a business world because when I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed in a unit called Marine Corps Air Facility at Quantico, Virginia. They support HMX-1. That's the helicopter unit that flies the president around. And so I was basically the comptroller for that base, and as well as I was also the purchasing agent, which are the two worst things you can give to a person, because not only can I spend the money, but I also control the money. So it was not the great thing. I had to actually talk to my commanding officer, which was at that time a colonel, and told him, I can't buy things. I'm going to not allow any authorization. Even though I was the only one authorized to say you could buy certain things, I subdelegated it to someone else, so I just held the purse of the money. Well, long story short, when I was in that unit, I found out that there were several criminal activities going on in this unit all over because they used to, at that time, carry petty cash. It was basically just a vault that carried about $5,000 to $10,000 worth of cash. A couple of incidents was a Marine had killed one of the civilians because the Marine thought that the civilian was knew that he was stealing from petty cash. Another one was, of course, one of the officers got court-martialed because he was stealing money. So cash. So I knew that was not a good thing to do. So I had a policy in my company that we would never have cash in our business. So to hear that there was, someone was taking money out of the ATM in cash, I was very surprised. So they called me into the office. So I sat in the office, and they said, someone actually ordered an ATM in your name, and it was, my name, David, and they've been taking out cash for the past 8 months. And they said, do you recognize this person? And they showed me a picture of the person who was drawing out cash. And I have never, ever been so surprised in my life. It was basically my one of my employees. And, to say that he was one of my employees, he wasn't just an employee. He had worked for me for about 5 years. And in that time period, I had trusted him. I had full confidence in what he was doing. His kids would play with my kids. We would have dinner together. So it wasn't just a social, he's an employee and blah, blah. This was a person that we were very close and intimate with. I kind of contemplate about it and say, now I know how Jesus felt when he knew that Judas was going to betray him. It was a shocker seeing this picture of my employee taking cash out of the ATM. I was so surprised. So as soon as I saw this, the first thing that happened was I put my Marine Corps hat on, which I become very mission-oriented, and I had to shut down every account that he was in. And so the way I did it was I had recently just hired this woman to help out with sales and everything. I mean, literally, she's only been on for about 2 months herself. So I give her a call and I said, look, I need for you to, email me all the passwords and usernames to all the financial things. I said, it's located here, and whatever you do, don't let this employee, let's call him Larry, Larry, know what's going on. And so now she's all scared, right? So she's sending me username and passwords so that I can go behind and start changing the username and passwords for everything that was going on. The reason why I didn't know that was because he had all the I trusted him so much with all that username and passwords. So this is going on. Finally, she's getting so scared because he's noticing something's going on. And so after a couple of hours, he gives me a call. And Larry says, David, I guess you found out. And I told him, I said, look, let's meet. And so we met at a public park to discuss, because at this point, to be quite frank with you, I really didn't even recognize the type of person he was. I thought I knew who he was. And so I was kind of like, I can't trust him with anything, even my own life. So I go and we meet him at this public park, and I said to him, he was kind of sad. You could tell that he was sad, and I had this more of a disappointed look at him. And I said to him, Larry, I said, I'm going to tell you what you did, okay? He goes, that you had stole money from my company, not just for me, but other employees. You knew that I laid off several people because of this economic downturn, and I could have used that money maybe even to keep their job. You did it in a time where my wife is pregnant. She was pregnant for, in her 4th month, and this gave her a lot of stress. And you did this in an economic downturn where it was the survival of the business was necessary. And I trusted you. And he started breaking down, crying, and, being really upset and just apologizing profusely. And I said to him, I told him, I forgive you. I really, really forgive you from the bottom of my heart, I forgive you for what you've done. And then I said to him, I said, but you know what you got to do? I said, you have to love yourself. Learn to love yourself and become better than what you are. And that was the last thing I said to him, and he left. He left to go back home. I never pressed charges. You know, people ask me, did you press charges? Did you do this? All this other stuff. I investigated. I did make a written report of it. It's documented in a written report. The aspect of not pressing charges, you said, well, is it one of those things where, you're being too lenient or whatever? No, I did not need to apply any justice on my own side. Justice eventually did apply to him. Eventually his wife found out that he was fired. He was trying to play a hoax on her and saying that it was an economic downturn. And then she found out it wasn't through basically an insurance claim, believe it or not. So I had to file a claim, an insurance claim that basically said, this guy stole from me. And so we had it through subrogation. Subrogation is when you file a claim to the insurance then tries to get money other ways. And they were trying to get money from him. And they have the lawyers to kind of do that stuff. So, she found out, she wound up divorcing him. He wound up going back to California. And then from the last time I heard, he's just, pretty much destitute out there. Now, in my eyes, I really meant that I forgave him. And I had no animosity towards him. In fact, I had nothing but care and concern for him. Not because he was my friend, but because I understood that he committed these great sins. And the only thing I found was compassion towards him. One thing about me is that I am not attached to money. I never was. I never have been. And the irony of this is because I've never been attached to money, it doesn't dominate me. It doesn't rule me. It doesn't cause me to get angry or frustrated or anything like that. That's not my weakest point. Money is not my weakest point. Though, really, winning a game is more of my weakest point. I like to always win a game, or I like to, strategize and see if they work and those types of things. But money isn't. So it was very easy for me to detach and focus on the forgiveness, focus on him, and be compassionate towards him, and really see what was necessary. And I know that when I die, God is going to say, you showed compassion in a situation. Come. You were a peacemaker. Right? And to this day, I still don't even think about it. I don't think about it in a way that's angry or anything like that. I share the story so that I can tell other people that, yes, it happens. Okay? And so forgiveness is important. Okay? And I cannot express how of an impact that was. Forensically speaking, meaning financial forensics, said they could easily show that he stole $90,000. But most likely he stole close to about $250,000. Think about that. $250,000 he could have potentially, stole from me. And I got none of that back. The insurance claim that I filed, I only got $25,000 back. That was it. That's as much as the insurance will cover. So, you look at it, and not only that, but my wife was pregnant. She was stressed out about the whole thing. It was just a lot of things that were going on at that time, and it was the least thing that I really could think about at that time. And yet I still was able to forgive him. So today's topic is about forgiveness, okay? And, and how do we forgive? How do we do that? Because, so many times I get a little frustrated. I have to admit, I go to these wonderful, I go to masses and these wonderful priests, and they're very good. And they tell you about we should forgive and the benefits of forgiving. It gives you peace. It will lead you to become a great saint. All of these great things. But at the end of the day, no one comes out knowing, well, how do I do that? Okay? How do I do that? And so it's kind of like going to, I don't know, a seminar that tells you how you can make a lot of money and the benefits of having a lot of money. And then you walk out of that seminar and you're like all, hyped up about making money. And you're like, well, how do I do it now? How do I make money? And that's the same thing. It's like they pump us up with this idea that like, wow, you gotta forgive 70 times 7. You gotta forgive from the bottom of your heart. You gotta, this is gonna bring you peace. It's gonna make you a saint. And then all of a sudden you're all charged up. And then you're like, oh, how do I do that? When my wife nags me every day, or when my employee just stole $90,000 from me, or my business partner just totally lied in front of my face. How do you do that? This is the fundamental question, because it's great to say we can forget. You should forgive, but how do we do it? How do we achieve that? Okay, so that's what today's topic is about. I hope that it does help out to forgive, because no matter what you do in life, in short of just putting yourself in a box and never interfacing with people, which you can't do, you're going to get hurt. It's the nature of the beast. It's what the world is all about, right? The world is sinful. I'm sinful. I hurt my wife. I hurt my kids. My kids hurt me. My wife hurts me, right? So it's going to happen. So let's think first of the beauty of the Holy Trinity, and I want to start from there, okay? Because the Holy Trinity, it always gets me upset when people say it's a mystery. The Holy Trinity is a mystery. And that's because people are trying to describe the essence of the Holy Trinity. Of course it's a mystery. But if you zoom out, the Holy Trinity is not overly complex, okay? I don't mean it that I know it all or something like that. But the Holy Trinity is about a relationship. That's what it's about, okay? One of the greatest things in Christianity is the Holy Trinity, because it's a relationship. That's what it is. It's a relationship. Just like a family is a relationship, the Holy Trinity is a relationship. It's the idea that we have in one God is 3 persons. Well, the 3 persons will have to have a relationship, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They have a Trinitarian relationship. A perfect relationship, a relationship that is full of love, okay? That's the beauty. No other religion has that. None. Not a single religion has the ability to describe God as a relationship, okay? Think about that. This is why the family is so important in society, because it reflects the Holy Trinity in its relationship, okay? So let's look at other religions, right? So you've got, you got polytheism out there, right? I don't mean this in a bad way, but you got pagans out there, right? That's polytheistic. And you might say, well, is that kind of like, a relationship? And the answer is absolutely not. If you look at most of the polytheism out there, it's really about warring factions of multiple gods. This God is fighting this God is fighting that, the dualism of godship and everything else. I mean, it's basically just one big family argument, in one sense. Okay. Even if you look at ancient Roman polytheism, you got warring, you got Hercules battling, these other gods, and all, they're just battling with each other, right? But there's no perfect union like the Trinitarian formula. So now let's go to something that's even closer to at least Christianity. And the first would be the Muslims, okay? The Muslims are close to it, so, but the problem with the monotheism of Muslim is that it's a master-slave relationship. It's a single entity in which God is the master and we're the slaves, okay? So not only do they not have a relationship, but it's this relationship that they do have between God and man, God or human beings, is one of master and slave. No love, just master and slave, right? Like we're just dogs, and and God is our master that can crush us if He wills it. So not very loving and relationship oriented. So let's go to the next level, right? Where Christianity comes from, which is Judaism, okay? You look at Judaism, and the best case scenario you're going to get out of that is God is a father, okay? Maybe a grumpy father sometimes, or a father that is a little bit, angry at one time and peace-loving at another time. But it's a single entity, and it's Father, Abba. That's what it is, okay? No Trinitarian formula. So again, a single entity, the monotheism is a single entity. But then you have Christianity. Christianity comes along, and they take that monotheism, okay, one God, but it's broken down into three persons, okay? Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That now becomes a relationship, because you can't have, a relationship with yourself like the other monotheists are, like, master, slave, or father. It's the Trinitarian formula that shows that not only are they a relationship, but it's a perfect relationship, always loving, always into each other, okay? That is why relationships are important in the Christian faith. If you think about it, in the Christian faith, not only is it a relationship, but it's a loving relationship that is so important to understand. It's just it's the idea of it, right? So if you study religions, and if you study them in the context of how people operate, okay, they're going to operate the way that they worship. So if you look at Muslims, it's a master-slave relationship. You're going to see a lot of master-slave type of relationship amongst the people. Same thing with Judaism, where you're going to see this patriarchal, very fatherly kind of a thing. But in Christianity, the focus so much is love. Love is the focus because it's a relationship. It's relational, okay? And love is what it binds these three entities together. The will of the Father, the will of the Holy Spirit, and the will of the children, the Son, are exactly the same. The will, okay, and we know that that's love, right? So that's why relationships are so important in Christianity. You look at the Decalogue, right? If you look at the Ten Commandments, what are they all about? They're about relationships, right? Honor thy mother and your father. That's the first relationship you need to have. You need to honor that. And if you break that, that's the most fundamental relationship, that if you break that one, you pretty much broken every single one of the other relationship ones, okay? So that's why, you look at, stealing, that's going to break relationship. Lying, that's going to break relationship. Adulterous, covetousness, they're all going to break relationships, okay? So it's important to understand that our model and what we're shooting for is the Holy Trinity. That's why relationships are important. So now, if we know that the relationship is important because God is a relationship, God is this three persons in one God, this is important to understand. If we want to imitate Christ or Jesus, we must be in communion and loving relationships. Okay? In other words, we cannot do religious things such as rosaries, daily masses, confessions, etc., and still hold grudges, not forgive, not show mercy, and not have relationships. That's fake. Okay? No matter how much you want to do your rosary and how much you do, how many times you go to confession or whatever, you are being fake if you have grudges against someone. This is why Jesus says this. If you have anything against your brother, before you come to the altar, make amends with your brother. It only makes sense, okay? The Trinitarian formula, great example of relationships, okay? So, now, if we want to build relationships, before we get to there, what's the contrary, to relationships? Well, segregation, division, individuality. That's what Satan and the world would want us to be, okay? How many times have you heard toxic. It's a toxic relationship. And I have to leave it because it's toxic. Okay, man, I could tell you in my own family that sometimes I feel like I'm in a toxic relationship. I don't mean it that way, but it is. I mean, it is. Yes, but ours is not to run away. Ours is to build that relationship, to eliminate that toxicity, to forgiveness and mercy. You look at Mother Teresa, and she went down to the most pitiable, the most, they smelled, they were decaying bodies in the streets of Calcutta. You want to talk about toxic? I mean, they're literally toxic, okay? From a biological disease to whatever it was. They were in the slums. They were in the garbage areas for people just to rot and die. And yet, they brought them to a loving relationship, okay? That's what they did. And they were able to console the people who were there. Most of the people who were dying on the streets were the elderly. And those elderly people would say, my own son dropped me off to die here. Okay? You want to talk about forgiveness. And so these great nuns, okay, the Sisters of Charity, and Mother Teresa had to nurse these people who not only had spiritual pain because their own family left them there to rot and decay, but also for them to physically heal them. And so we have to understand that to be a great saint, to be a great, a holy saint, is to forgive so that we can elevate and bring relationships. We can bring people back in a loving relationship. That is our goal, because that's how we mimic the Holy Trinity. That's how we mimic Christ. It's great to say, what would Jesus do and everything else, but really it's about how am I mimicking the Holy Trinity by providing this loving relationship. And the first thing that we do is we use forgiveness and mercy. Okay? So, the world and the devil wants us to segregate, divide, provide individuality. They'll say things like, it's a toxic relationship. You need to leave. You need to go away. That's not going to happen. Now, don't get me wrong. If you do have a serious I'm a big, firm believer that if you have an abusive spouse, you should segregate to protect yourself, but never to destroy that relationship, but you do need to segregate to protect yourself. Okay. I'm not promoting, abuse or anything like that. And I would never do that at all. But a lot of times, it's not really about abuse. It's really, most people, it's really about selfishness and everything else. But let's talk about what is the problem. Why don't we forgive? Okay? I mean, a lot of times we have to analyze and say, knowing how to forgive, first we have to analyze what the problem is, which is why don't we forgive? What is the problem? Why can't I forgive someone? Okay? So I'm going to list about 18 ideas that might cause you not to forgive. Just that's what happens. The first one is it's tough to forgive. I mean, I'm not going to say that it's easy. If it was easy, then we're all saints, right? But it's in the toughness that makes us a saint. Okay? As I will always say, no pain, no gain. If it was easy to forgive, then we wouldn't be saints, right? So it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be difficult. So yeah, it is tough, and we have to face it. It is tough. Okay, going to someone, yeah, I forgive you for what you've done. Okay. Number two, maybe you don't know how to forgive. I find that especially with young kids. Okay. You can't expect young kids to forgive another kid when they really don't even know how to forgive. They might even know what it means to forgive, okay? So a lot of times in our family, sometimes we have to say, you gotta, say, I'm sorry, and you have to say, I forgive you, right? to give them the good habit of saying, I forgive you. Okay? And to think about it, to think about what they did wrong and to do that. So one is physically, we have to teach our young kids. And sometimes these kids who've never been taught how to forgive, they become older people. And when they become older people, it becomes harder and harder to learn how to forgive. So ignorance, how to forgive, A good example, especially for parents, is to lead by example and asking your children for forgiveness. I do that sometimes. If I make a mistake, I say, hey, I'm sorry. Do you forgive me? And, they'll say, I forgive you, Dad. Okay? So leadership by example, asking them, hey, you did something wrong here. Oh, I'm sorry, Dad. I forgive you. All right? Please don't do it again. Okay? So you can lead by example, all right, to show how people can forgive and how to do it. But there are people who might not know how to forgive, okay? They just, they really don't, or they're embarrassed to forgive, okay? Number 3, using unforgiveness as a punishment or mind game. This is very common. I find that a lot of people use this idea that I don't forgive you as some kind of punishment to another person, or I call them mind games, like it's a little ploy for them to gain some other thing, right? Like, I'm not going to forgive you unless you do something to me or you do this other thing, right? That's not really helpful. First of all, it's not sincere, okay? And second of all is that the one who's really getting trapped the most is you, the one who's not forgiving, okay? So, so unforgiveness because you're playing some kind of punishment or mind game is, again, not sincere, and the one who's really losing out is yourself, because most of the time what I find is people who do that, you're the one that's missing out. You're the one that's not going, having fun out there. In a lot of cases, people don't even care if they're unforgiven or not, right? I mean, so whether they're forgiven or not, some people don't even care. So now you're chaining yourself up and acting like, some kind of self-righteous person when really it probably doesn't even bother other people, okay? So that's number 3. Number 4, wrong idea to forgive and forget, okay? Sometimes we have this idea that, everyone says, oh, just forgive and forget, move on, right? And it's hard. It's hard to forgive and forget, okay? And we're going to say that. But, and it doesn't mean that you have to forget. I'm going to talk about a little bit later down about why sometimes you might not want to forget, that you want to have a little bit of an idea of what the pain was, okay? So, but forgiveness doesn't mean you have to forget. Okay, forgiveness means that you generously want to let yourself go and say, this is not going to bother me, and I genuinely forgive him for what he or she did to me. Okay, and that forgiveness might not even affect the person that you're forgiving. That person might even be dead. Okay, that person might be miles away. That person might be whatever hurt that you have right now. If you forgive that person and they don't even exist anymore because they're dead, or they're in some other country or some other location, that's okay. It's setting you free. Okay, so you just say, "I forgive you." All right, and I recommend doing that. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. Wrong idea that forgiveness means no justice, and that you are relieving that person of the responsibilities. Sometimes we think that if I say, let's say, for example, my kids do something, right, to me, where they maybe they were sassy to me or something like that, and I say, "Hey, honey, you were being sassy to me," and they look back and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Dad," and then I say, "Well, I forgive you." Then we have this idea that that gives them. That I'm condoning their behavior or something like that. That is not the case at all, okay? There is punishment, okay, that you can mete out even with forgiveness, okay? So I'll give you an example. My employee that, that embezzled, at least $90,000 from me, he lost his job. He was fired, okay? that was justice that was met. He lost his job. I didn't say, I forgive you, now come back to my job and start working with the accounting. No, that's not, that's not reasonable. So forgiveness doesn't mean that we condone or there is no justice that needs to be meted out. Justice does need to be meted out, okay? You can forgive someone and still send them to jail, okay? Because justice still has to be rendered. But also remember that justice can be rendered in other ways. It doesn't mean that you have to be the justice seeker, because that sometimes leads to unforgiveness as well, okay? Number 6, forgiveness means you're condoning the action? No, you're not. Number 7, tired of forgiving the same thing over and over and over again, okay? I don't know how many times, you might have an imperfection or maybe some venial sins that occur with your spouse that causes things to happen, and you have to always forgive them, right? If you're saying, I'm tired of forgiving you for the same thing over and over again, then the chances are you're really not forgiving them, okay? Because when you forgive someone, you realize that this is a pattern of behavior that this person has, okay? And I'm not saying that, it is you're condoning the action. It's just the fact that it's an imperfection or some kind of attachment or something that's happening that needs to be dealt with first and primarily to the person itself. But the problem is you can't make other people saints. You can only lead, coax, and whatever. But true forgiveness will, keep saying 70 times 7, I forgive you, and move on without really bothering them in doing that, okay? And we'll talk about how we can do that when we talk about the solution part. But right now we're talking about the problem. Why are we not forgiving, okay? So number 8 really means that number 7, where it says tired of forgiving the same thing over and over again, it most likely means that you're not really forgiving. You're just saying, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. But sooner or later, you're going to come to the end of your rope, I guess, and then realize and explode on that person. That's typically what happens. Number 8, forgiveness means that you have to keep trusting them. Some people think that, if I forgive someone, I have to keep trusting them. And that is absolutely not true either, right? And let's say, for example, you have a spouse that, spends money erratically, okay, really erratically. Actually, when I was in the Marine Corps, that happened a lot. We had a lot of Marines who would be deployed overseas, and their wives would spend money like there's no tomorrow. And then when the Marines came back, they literally got calls from these car dealers or wherever that said hey, you're defaulting on your loan, this and that. And they're like, well, I didn't buy any car. I didn't do this. I didn't. And all of a sudden, they talk to their wife and they're like, oh, I bought this. I bought that. They can forgive their wives, but they have to do some serious talking about financial responsibility. And if their wife can't handle the financial responsibility, they might have to get a budget and say, look, here's your budget, here's whatever, here's your credit card, and that's the most you're going to get, and this is it. So yes, it's the same thing. Just like when I had a problem with my employee, I fired him. I didn't trust him again. I couldn't trust him ever again on that aspect of it. But forgiving doesn't mean that we don't, that we have to automatically trust them and bring them back to, the normal state. And that is not the case. But sometimes we have this idea that, hey, is that forgiveness means that I have to trust this person again? No, even your own spouse. If they violate or do something to you that has, some serious consequences or certain patterns, you can forgive them, but you have to take guard of what's going on as well at the same time. Okay? If your spouse is an alcoholic, let's say, right? And they're violent or something like that, it's okay to say, I forgive you, but we need to separate, or, in this case, or you need to stop drinking, alcohol, in those types of things. So you still need to judge a person's trust based off of what's going on with the situation, and not think that the forgiveness means that you have to bring that trust. That's really not what we're, what you're going at. You look at even confessions, okay? Even though we're forgiven in confessions, part of the requirements for confession to be forgiven is a firm purpose of amendment. And so there is a level of, in some ways, God saying, I'm going to trust you that you're going, I'm not going to say I trust you. To really be sincere and trustworthy, you have to make firm purpose of amendment. And that's the same thing with when someone hurts us, that they have to do some kind of firm purpose of amendment to bring that trust back, to bring our lives back to normal again. Because the trust has been broken. Now we got to figure out, are you willing to win that trust back by changing who you are? So that alcoholic, is he going to not drink anymore? Or, that abusive husband, is he not, if he's going to take anger management issues and take it seriously? Or maybe that unfaithful spouse, are they taking steps to not be unfaithful? Okay. So again, forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to automatically go back to the trusting them again. Okay. Number 9, self-righteousness. Okay. A lot of times I see this a lot where spouses, are self-righteous. They easily get offended. Oh my goodness, look at what they did. They don't see their own problems and their own issues. I've seen people who actually, do the same thing that hurts other people, that other people did to them, that they're not forgiving for. And you're kind of like, wow, why aren't you not forgiving these people when you're doing the exact same thing? Okay? So you have to look at it and say, am I being self-righteous? Am I, do I see the faults of others? Okay? And this is why we're going to talk about this. Forgive and forget is actually not an easy, not something that you should do is forget, because the forgetting part is I'm going to talk about is helps us to have compassion when we remember what has happened to us, and we'll talk about that a little further. So self-righteous, are we being self-righteous? Number 10. We say things like, "Oh, that action is so unforgivable." I really, in my eyes, I haven't seen anything that I would say something's unforgivable, and I've contemplated a lot of things as well. We're fixated in the wrong. We're fixated on the wrong. Being wrong, and this is almost slightly diabolical in a sense that, remember, there's diabolical obsession that occurs, and we get fixated on the wrong that someone did. We got to snap out of it, and the way that we do it is contemplating on other things outside of what the wrong was. Again, it goes into ruminating on our anger, okay? And Satan does influence us. Diabolical obsession, remember that. This slight little influence where something went wrong, let's say, for example, my daughter was sassy at me, and then all of a sudden I hear like little whispers like, oh, she's always sassy at you, and she's doing it because she doesn't like you, or blah, 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 blah. That's diabolical obsession. And that's just Satan's way of instigating and making you think and being what we call fixated with this anger. You need to snap out of that fixation with contemplating other things other than that. Christ and his suffering, Our Lady and her sorrows. Let little infractions we don't really forgive. This is a big thing too. Is little infractions that keep occurring. A spouse has an imperfection or some kind of venial sin that occurs, and we don't really say anything, and we don't forgive, and then all of a sudden it explodes into a larger situation. Okay. Number 14, not truly forgiving, but only saying that you do. That's a big thing where people say, I forgive you, but they're not. They're really just saying, rotely that I forgive you. But deep down inside, they're harboring the anger. Number 15, being a punching bag and not expressing to another that it did not injure me. We have this idea that a great saint is someone who's a punching bag. And great saints aren't punching bags. Great saints are forgiving, but they express the injustice that they do, that has been done, okay? And that's what it is. I mean, Jesus told the truth, and he constantly told the truth, and, and that's what happened. But the consequences of that still led him to be crucified, okay? But he still forgave, okay? But we're not punching bags. Jesus did not go up there to be a punching bag. He did it to show the world that he loved us. That's the reason why. Number 16, world does not allow us to forgive. Remember, the world's advice, okay, is influenced by Satan and typically are not the best advice to have, okay? They overemphasize this segregation. Nowadays, it's all toxic relationship. It's about being the perfect relationship. I don't know how many people seek this perfect relationship where it's almost nearly impossible. In the Catholic Church, we realize there are, the world is not perfect. I'm going to tell you that. It's not perfect. But forgiveness and mercy is there to help us where it's not perfect. Okay? Number 17, world wants us to escape from reality and, segregate ourselves, okay? And number 18, sometimes we blow things out of proportion, I've seen a lot of people who won't forgive other people over petty things, over the most, and even if you talk to people who haven't talked to each other for 20 years, they don't even remember what they were arguing about. If that is that ridiculous, if that's causing that relationship to be like that over something you don't even remember, that's pretty pitiable, okay? So those are the reasons why we might not forgive, right? But let's talk about how do we forgive and what can we do about it, right? What are the solutions? So the first is, forgiveness does not imply a cancel justice. Reparation is still going to be made. That person who caused that infraction or whatever it is, they're going to pay. And it's not going to be by you, most likely. It's going to be by God, right? Number 2, forgive and forget. Now, we have this idea that, we should forget. And, I was listening to one of our friar priests, and he made a good point. He said, you shouldn't forget. And the reason why is that, by not forgetting, we can show compassion. And what do I mean by that? Because because an employee had embezzled $90,000 or more from my business, when I see a fellow entrepreneur, a fellow businessman or woman having that same problem, I can empathize with that person because that memory is there, is vivid, okay? I'm not using that memory to unforgive the person who harmed me. I'm using that memory to show compassion towards other who had the similar type of issues and consoling them. Because entrepreneurs and businessmen and women are human beings. And they're going to go through their ups and downs. Okay? So it's important. A person who has, had a nasty spouse or something like that, they can empathize with other spouses. Okay? So, yes, we don't want to forget, but we don't want to use our memory to hold grudges. We use our memory as a beautiful way of showing compassion to other people who had a similar, hurt. Number 3, little forgiveness. We need to truly forgive others for little faults. I find that most people, and including myself, we get angry over big things more because we don't really forgive in the little things. It's called the little forgiveness. Forgive them. This is where the 70 times 7 occurs. Because most of the time, the big problems only occur once or twice. But then, how many times in a relationship, in a family or whatever, it's the little things, as women would say, how many times does a man leave the toilet seat up, right? Or how many times does the wife keep nagging you, right? Or maybe they say certain things that in an opportune time or something like that, right? There's a lot of things. So it's the little forgiveness. that you forgive them. Okay? The fourth, conscientious forgiveness. Not one of these, oh yeah, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. No. Conscientious forgiveness, where you think about what they did and you actually say, I forgive them. From the bottom of my heart, I forgive what they did. And not, I forgive. That's not conscientious. That's rote forgiveness that's not effective. But really conscientious. And you're going to feel the peace that comes into your heart when you just think about it and say, you know what? I'm letting it go. I forgive that person for what they did. And you don't have to, tell the other person. You don't have to do that. This is the beauty about forgiveness. You can do it, and they might not even know about it, okay? But that's really the important thing, is to think about it, what they're doing, okay? Let's say that your wife nags all the time, or using that as an example. You think about it, and you say, you know what? My wife has a problem with nagging. That's her weakness. But I'm going to forgive for that and let it go, okay? So that's called conscientious forgiveness, or at least that's what I call it. Now, there's a couple of ones where I say zoom out, okay? I have a term, it's called zooming out. See the big picture, just zoom out. Sometimes forgiveness is hard when we're so focused on the minute little things that we never zoom out, okay? We don't zoom out. And so, we zoom out, okay? Here's one thing to zoom out on. We are all sinners, all right? We are all doomed to hurt someone, okay? That's the fact, okay? Even a saint hurt other people, okay? Zoom out. We are doomed to sin, which means we are doomed to hurt other people, okay? Even venial sins hurt other people, okay? Let's say just nagging. Nagging could be possibly a venial sin. It's an involuntary venial sin. That means that the person still can go to heaven, okay? Because we all are inundated with involuntary venial sins, okay? Even voluntary venial sins, white lies or whatever, it's going to happen. The world is sinful. We are going to hurt. So let's set the expectation that we are going to get hurt. But that's part of the course. But the beauty about getting hurt is we can do a couple of things. If we get hurt, we can either grow in love by forgiving and showing mercy, or we can escape in solitude and anger. That's the difference. The difference is we can grow in love or escape in solitude and anger. You choose. Forgiveness grows in love, and unforgiveness, we run away and escape into solitude and anger, right? But just know that the world is painful. The world is sinful. That's part of the course, but that's how we grow in holiness. Number 6, another zoom out. You are not the avenger or justice seeker. You're not here to avenge people. God is. God is the ultimate the ultimate avenger and, justice. All right. Zooming out again. All these trials that you're going to face. Why do we have sin that abounds? So that grace can abound even more. So that we can become great saints. That's what these trials are all about. They're really become stepping stones to become great saints. Another zoom out. All trials are made for us to become saints. At the end of the day, that's great. Number 9, we need to learn to accept people as they are, which are frail and sinful. That's what they are. That's what we should accept them. Once we accept people who they are, because part of our frustration and part of our unforgiveness is the idea that, why aren't they changing? Why, I forgave them already, or, they should realize that it's bad. They might not. They might not realize it. You have to accept them for who they are and not beat your head over and say, well, they should know, they should be better or whatever. Accept them for who they are. Okay? The next is contemplate on this. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. And the first person you need to bring peace to is yourself. As I always say to people, the first person that you need to love is yourself. Why? Because you can't give what you don't have. If you don't have internal peace, if you don't love yourself, right? Love your neighbor as yourself, how can you love others? That's the same thing. Okay? So one of the greatest beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers, start with peace in your heart. And that's by forgiving. Forgiving, okay? And then this is my favorite of all to help you forgive. Detachment. Detach. Saint John of the Cross said that to truly love something, you have to detach from it, okay? It's only in our attachments that we actually do not love it, okay? And let me ask you, so for example, alcohol, a person who's addicted to alcohol is attached to one thing, and that is the high that they get from alcohol, okay? That's what they are. But they don't enjoy the drink. They don't enjoy the whole aspect of the drink itself, because all they want to do is get the alcohol so they can get drunk. All right? So to truly appreciate a glass of wine or a beer is to really, really be detached from it. Okay? It's only in our attachments that we get so sucked into the anger when it doesn't, when you don't get it the way that you want to. So if for example, if you got an alcoholic and they got a glass of beer, and all of a sudden you took that glass of beer and threw it, they'd be very angry at you. But for any natural person, they'd be like, oh, what'd you do that for? Right? And it wouldn't bother them. I'm going to give you two saints about detachment. The first is Saint Therese. Saint Therese, in her book, talks about how one of the things that annoyed her the most was the fact that when she would, talk to another sister about some kind of inspiration she had or whatever, that sister would then take it and she would hear that sister talk about this inspiration to another sister and claim it as her own. And it would kind of annoy her, right? Because she was attached to her own ideas. But then she had an inspiration that said, these ideas aren't St. Therese's or herself's. It really is God's. And if these are God's inspirations, then everyone should enjoy them. And she became detached from her own ideas, and she never got aggravated. This is the lesson of detachment. St. John Paul II. If you Google YouTube, there's a scene in St. John Paul II where he's scolding a Jesuit priest. Okay, scolding. I've never seen St. John Paul II angry. We think of him as like this holy man who wouldn't raise his voice or anything like that, but he's literally scolding, a Jesuit priest in an airport. Okay, now why? Now they're not going to tell you why, except for the fact that he's a communist, probably a liberation theology priest who took arms and fought. Right? That's what liberation theology is all about. The idea that priests and everyone else here are fighting for the kingdom literally with guns and bullets, which is absolutely wrong, which was very, very popular and still is in Latin America, this liberation theology. And so he got upset and he scolded this priest, right on news and on video and everything else. Now, why? Why do you think he was? Because he was very attached to the idea of peaceful resistance, nonviolent resistance. And why would he be attached to that? Because coming from Poland, where Nazi Germany took control and basically slaughtered a lot of Polish people, Jews as well. That's where Auschwitz is. He spent most of his life in near Krakow. Krakow is very close to Auschwitz, which is one of the major sites of the Final Solution, as well as Polish prisoners and everything else. He saw the horrors, and he had to fight the resistance in a peaceful manner. Then after the Nazi takeover, he lived in communist Poland, where Soviet Union occupied the country, and they lived in oppressive Soviet, communist country. Now, here is a communist priest fighting for liberation theology. I'm sure that did not make him angry. I'm sure he did. It made him very angry. Because John Paul II, who lived in two oppressive regimes for decades, I'm talking years and years, decades, okay? It wouldn't be really until he was Pope that he would be released from it, because then he would be in Rome, was able to defeat communism through peaceful means, okay? And so this idea he was very attached to, he got angry, and this is what happened. Now, I'm just, again, this is my take on it and everything else, but I can say that probably is, what's going on, because there were other heresies going on and everything, and he never got, upset like this and started yelling at people. But I think this touched him very closely because of his own experience and his own aspect of what's going on. That's my 2 cents of commentary there on detachment. But the idea here is the more we can be detached, the more we can actually zoom out. And the more we zoom out, the more we can be forgiving. Okay? It's only in our attachments to our world, our little behaviors, our whatever it is, that we become unforgivable. Because it's almost like they're ruining our lives. When really, when you zoom out, they're not. They're actually making you a saint. And it's almost laughable, to be honest with you. I've seen people who try to, I don't mean it in a bad way, but sometimes they say things to you just to hurt you, and you're just kind of like, wow, that's, not good. And I'll give you an example. My daughter, and when they go through their puberty stage, they do get very emotional. And sometimes my daughters would say things that were very, very, bad towards me. And because I zoomed out and because, I'm very detached, I look at it and I didn't laugh at her, but it's kind of like, wow, those hormones are really kicking in, and you can say that and really forgive and say, honey, I forgive you, because it's really not you that's saying this. But when you get so attached to certain things, like I'm your father, you don't talk to me like that, that you're not going to get anywhere far with forgiveness, especially when hormones kick in, or adolescence comes in, or maybe when they go through the terrible twos and they say no to you, you don't go and say, well, you don't say no to your dad. They don't even know what they're saying at 2 years old. Again, detach. And when you run a business or when you have a family, you got to learn to detach, okay? And it will help you so much in forgiving and zooming out and seeing the bigger picture, to realize that that's really petty to not forgive, or even to be hurt in some cases, okay? Number 12, confession. We must go to confession. Now, when I say frequently, I know you might not like this, frequently here means every other week. I know people say every month. I disagree. I think every other week is not even enough. I think every week should be what I consider the norm. But if you can't go every week, I would recommend every other week. Okay? You can always find faults. I do. I find faults all the time. And I repeat those faults all the time. Okay? And that's because I'm working on them, but it also reminds me that I too have this problem. Okay? I was driving one time and I cut this woman cut me off, I remember one time. And I got so angry. I was like, oh man, I can't believe, she did that. And then I think it was my guardian angel kind of said, you do the same too. You actually have done that. And then I realized, oh yeah, I have done that before. And I realized, I make that same fault. I could forgive her. So remembering that we too are sinners, we too make the same mistakes, will remind us that we will always, if we do it, then how can I not forgive another person for doing the same thing that I do? Number 13, you've made the same mistakes as well. That's what we mentioned. Number 14, contemplate Christ and Our Lady instead of the situation. Okay? God's forgiveness in confession and mercy in his divine mercy. Think about that and contemplate about that. So in conclusion, to be a saint, we must reflect the Holy Trinity by building relationships of love in our family, at work, and with our neighbors. Forgiveness and mercy is essential to building the relationship of love because we are all sinners and have attachments and imperfections that cause us to voluntarily or involuntarily hurt others. But God gives us great opportunity to mimic him by showing forgiveness and mercy just as he forgives us in confession and gives us his divine mercy. Remember, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. And peace begins with myself in forgiveness. Let's end it with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thanks for listening to me, David Cease, at Practical Catholic. Here is a reflection for you. Take a moment and reflect, am I conscientiously forgiving others? Feel free to share your reflection or leave a comment on the podcast, Instagram, and Facebook at Practical Catholic, or visit my webpage at practicalcatholic1, that is the number 1.com.
You're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.